And welcome back to another daily devotion. I'm Pastor Roy here at Woodlawn Christian Church in Lake City, Iowa, and this devotion is for Monday, April 17th of 2023. We're going to finish the 14th chapter of the book of 1 Corinthians today. And yes, I'm back in a sweatshirt. It is cold and windy out today. It's icky and nasty, and I'm over at the church by myself, so I've got my favorite grubby old cap on. It's actually my workout hat that my daughter gave me many years ago. And it's my favorite cap because my daughter gave it to me. So with that, let's get down to business. We're going to look at verses 26 to 40. We're going to finish chapter 14 today. This has got some tough stuff in it to deal with, and this is another place where I really wish we had the other side of the equation. We knew what Paul was responding to and what some of the concerns are that Paul's dealing with. That we just some of it we can discern from what Paul says. Some of it we have to kind of guess, and some of it we just kind of got to shrug that I don't know. And we have to be willing to do that sometimes in Scripture to be able to go, I don't know. I guess I will know when I get there to heaven, that is. But this is talking about orderly worship, this whole section 26 to 40. And they've been talking about speaking in tongues and prophesying and all that good stuff. So let's dive into it and see what we can come up with here for us. Verses 26 to 40 in chapter 14 of 1 Corinthians. What then, brethren? When you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Let all things be done for edification. If any speak in a tongue, let there be only two or at most three, and each in turn, and let one interpret. But if there is no one to interpret, let each of them keep silence in church and speak to himself and to God. Let two or three prophets speak, and let the others weigh what is said. If a revelation is made to another sitting by, let the first be silent. For you can all prophesy one by one, so that all may learn and all be encouraged. And the spirits of prophets are subject to prophets. For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. As in all the churches of the saints, the women should keep silence in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be subordinate, as even the law says. If there is anything they desire to know, let them ask their husbands at home. For it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. What? Did the word of God originate with you, or are you the only ones it has reached? If anyone thinks that he is a prophet or spiritual, he should acknowledge that what I am writing to you is a command of the Lord. If anyone does not recognize this, he is not recognized. So, my brethren, earnestly desire to prophesy, and do not forbid speaking in tongues, but all things should be done decently and in order. Okay. First of all, we have to realize that worship in the early church was probably just like the communion meal, the Last Supper, Eucharist is totally different in the early church. Their worship service would be greatly different than what we do. It would be much more probably along the lines of what Pentecostal churches like, but maybe I don't think it's even probably like that. You would have different people coming up and speaking during the service, rather than having a minister per se as we do now. We certainly wouldn't be having this high church. If you're part of the high church, tradition, with all the robes and the stoles and pomp and circumstance, and I rarely wear robes or stoles because I'm a low church. That's what we do here. And it would be more along the lines of perhaps a low church, but still, again, very different, I think, because you'd have people speaking in tongues. You would have people that would be prophesying. But again, you're not supposed to just be all over the place. That's what Paul's getting at here. It's not just this big, massive chaos. You're supposed to do it in turn. You're supposed to, only two or three are going to be speaking in tongues or prophesying. And if you're speaking in tongues, you don't have anybody to translate, be quiet. Because that's not edifying anyone. And it's all about, as he says in verse 26, let all things be done for edification. It's all about bringing people closer to God. That's the whole point of worship, is to do that and to teach and to preach and to bring people closer to God. So that's why chaos doesn't do that. And I've been in some worship services where there became absolute abject chaos. I've talked about this before, and I think I talked about it in the last couple of days. Um, I don't think I use this example. I remember a few years ago at the church we were going to in Omaha, there was a Korean group that worshiped there as well. From Burma, Myanmar nowadays. But the Korean were there, and somebody had the brilliant idea that we were going to get together and have Christmas Eve service together, and we're going to sing hymns. But the Korean are going to sing in Korean, and we're going to sing in English, and we're not necessarily divided. We're intermingled, which is a great thing. You don't have the one group here, one group there, so you're intermingled. And so when you're starting to sing these hymns, you've got them singing in Korean, us singing in English. Nobody could understand what was going on. It was just chaos. And I know especially my wife got no edification out of that. She just absolutely was distraught that they had ruined Christmas Eve worship by doing that. Would have been the proper thing to do, in my opinion, and my wife would have agreed with me, would have been to have the Korean sing these songs, we sing these songs, or we sing a verse, and then they repeat the verse. That would have worked too. That would have worked great, actually. And kind of in responding back and forth. They sing the first verse, we sing the second, whatever. You get the idea. But having to go all together is kind of like what Paul's trying to avoid here. You just have this din and confusion. And I told the story about being at the restaurant the other day. I know I told that story. That's the problem. And that is what the miracle of Pentecost was that people could hear what was being said in their own language, and somehow that the miracle was in the hearing, not in the speaking. I've always said that. It's always been my opinion. So we need to avoid that in worship. Don't be having a whole bunch of chaos break out. Don't have this one little group over here, going doing their thing and being real loud, and another group over here doing their thing, being real loud, and they'd just be nuts. So that, I think, is the biggest part of what he's trying to get at here. The more troublesome part here is where you get into the last half of verse 33, and you go from there through 35, where it says, "As in all the churches of the saints." This would be to all the churches of this Christian movement. And remember that in Paul's lifetime, basically the church really had not broken away. It really still is a sect of Judaism, okay? As in all the churches of the saints, all these gatherings of the Christ followers, the women, and that word really would be more to mean wives, should keep silence in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak. That's harsh. And the question would be is it back to this whole thing about not having a bunch of chaos going on. If everybody's just turning to their spouse, and again, it's a patriarchal society, so we have to deal with that. If they're all turning to their spouse or to the neighbor and saying, "What in the world are they talking about? What did that guy say over there? What's over there?" And you just add to the circus oriented element of the whole worship service. It's just a bunch of chaos. And so the idea is that and sometimes if we just stop and listen and think about it before we ask the question, sometimes the next thing said can help us to understand what was being said also. So I think it's all about trying to keep this order. And we have to remember that back in chapter 11, Paul did talk about the women praying and prophesying in the church. So and Paul had women that were the leaders in the church, and he talks about some of them being disciples and apostles, and so we've got to be careful that we don't get carried away with this saying women shouldn't be leaders, which a lot of people do. A lot of churches do. I shouldn't say a lot. There are churches that do. Let's not say a lot. I think that's the minority. But there are people I know. A lovely young lady that she doesn't believe the women should be ministers and preachers. She's I don't have a problem with that She does. And so there are those that have that feeling. And if that is what they gives them edification is to have, if that is the environment where you feel more edified, go for it. Find a church that falls into that way of thinking. I don't have a problem with women being teachers or preaching. That's I don't get that from here that it's saying do not let women be leaders. Any rate, but it is a difficult passage, and I will grant you that it's one of those things where you go, Paul, why did you say that? And I think though that Paul's trying to deal with what's going on in their timeline. In the early church, you had a lot more people speaking in tongues, a lot more people prophesying. And again, the style of worship was not conducive. We've changed our way of worshiping. It would be interesting to have been in the early church, I think, to see what exactly it was like. And it may or may not be edifying to us. It may or may not have been something that we would have gained spiritually from. Or we may have been, maybe our style, we may discover that style of worshiping is much more, feeds your spirit much more than what we do. I don't know. It'd be a cool experiment. First thing we do when we have that time machine running, we go back and we join Paul for worship. Got to deal with that understanding of the language difference, though. That's always, people always say, I'll go back in time and be there at this and that. And it's like, yeah, how are you going to deal with that you don't speak that language? But I digress. I've rambled on enough. Any rate, at the end of 39, he says, so my brethren, and I've seen some people say that's translated sometimes brother and sister. It's brethren. It's a masculine. It means brother. Earnestly desire to prophesy and do not forbid speaking in tongues. It is something that should be done, but all things should be done decently in order. Again, summing up the whole of this section really, and even that part about the women, in my opinion, it's geared towards keeping worship in check. Okay, so all right, with that, I'm gonna let you go. We rambled on way too long, but have a blessed day, and please be a blessing to someone today. And if you enjoy this devotion or any of the others that are on the channel, please do like and subscribe. We'd love to have you back again. Take care and be a blessing to someone today. Bye-bye.